This video is sponsored by CleanMyMac. This is the original Olympus EM10, which I bought from MPB for $199 recently. And this is the Olympus EM5, almost identical, but they are very different in quite a few ways, and that's what this video is about. Let's see the difference between the EM10 line of cameras and the EM5 line of cameras, and which might be best for you. Versus. I was such a fan of the EM5 that last year I crowned it first place in my top 10 tiny camera recommendations video. So the EM10 has got big boots to fill. The EM10 came out in 2014, so it's 2 years younger than the EM5, which came out in 2012. In that time, the sensor remained the same, but the engine that processes the images got a little bit of an update. So if you are shooting primarily JPEGs, the EM10 should outperform the EM5. If you are shooting RAW, they will both pretty much be identical. And one of the reasons I love both of these cameras is they have a very early iteration of in-camera stabilization called sensor shift stabilization. Weirdly, the older EM5 has 5-axis stabilization and the EM10 only has 3-axis stabilization. So the older EM5 is a little bit better in that respect. Despite them looking quite the same, the EM10 is quite a bit smaller and lighter, and I wonder if that's why it's only got 3-axis stabilization versus 5, because there's just less space under the hood. But I wouldn't say that either of these cameras are big. They're both very much in the tiny camera category. If size is a massive factor for you, the EM10 may have the edge, but there's a couple of things in the EM5 that makes the relatively negligible size difference worth it, in my opinion. One of those things is the stabilization, and another biggie is the EM5 is weather sealed and the EM10 is not. Now I know these are old cameras, and would you trust weather sealing on a 10-year-old camera? But it's better to have than not, right? Even if the seals are a little bit older now because it is an older camera, surely having some protection against the elements is better than none at all. So if you are looking for something a little bit more rugged and weather sealed, the EM5 is the easy option. But to have full weather sealing, 1, you're going to need a weather sealed lens, and 2, you probably don't want to buy a 10-year-old camera. Both cameras have a 3-inch articulating screen, and this style of screen is really growing on me. I think if I'm shooting video, I quite like a flippy out screen, but when you are shooting street photography in particular, being able to tilt the screen up I think is quite nice. And both of them have this. And very important for a lot of people I know, both cameras have an electronic viewfinder built in. This is one of the smaller cameras that has an EVF. The only thing that's smaller that has an EVF is probably the GM5 in the Lumix range. So if an EVF is important and size is important, the EM5 and the EM10 are a great choice. And both cameras have a stupidly robust magnesium alloy build quality. They are really sort of like classically built, strong cameras. It's the kind of camera where if you drop it on the floor, you'd check if the floor was okay first. And it's funny to me that myself and a lot of other photographers have been searching endlessly for, you know, the perfect everyday camera. Of course, I don't think that exists. I think we go through phases and experimentation, but I would say across the board, certainly for me, the holy trinity of what I look for in a small everyday carry camera is stabilization, weather sealing, and an electronic viewfinder. Those 3 things are nigh on impossible to find in a small camera, and the EM5 in 2012 did it. It just came out perfect. And I don't think anyone really appreciated how rare that was going to become in the following years. My next 3 sets of priorities after the holy trinity of an everyday carry is front and back dials, a flippy screen, and Wi-Fi connectivity. So 2 out of 3 for the EM5 on that one, and 3 out of 3 for the EM10. So in terms of weight, the EM5 is 425 grams body only, and then the EM10 is 396 grams. So even though the EM10 is a little bit smaller in terms of dimensions, there's not that much difference in the weight. Like picking them up now, literally couldn't tell you. Subscribe for more very scientific tests. So what I'm saying is, in terms of weight, there's very little between them. But in terms of size, I do think it's much more apparent that the EM10 is smaller. So I run my entire life on this MacBook, and I think it may be obvious to some that I am not the most organized when it comes to my files and organization and my online ecosystem. And my beautiful, very blooming expensive Mac was running horrifically. Like, editing was really, really slow, and I was even contemplating just upgrading my machine way prematurely because of the performance. But it turns out all I needed to do was to get tidy. I used CleanMyMac, the kind sponsor of today's video, and it scanned each and every one of my hard drives, and I managed to remove terabytes of clutter and junk. You can run SmartCare, which will scan your machine and tell you what you need to change to make your Mac perform faster. And my machine health, it gives you a little diagnosis. My machine health went from poor to fair and excellent. It's now excellent in no time at all. So if you are in the Mac ecosystem, CleanMyMac is an absolute lifesaver. It is the ultimate tool for fixing your online space and turning it into a more tidy environment, which I desperately needed. So check out the link in the description below for a 7-day free trial, and you can download CleanMyMac on the Mac App Store or directly from the MacPaw website as well. A benefit of the EM10 is it has a built-in flash for the montage. Whereas the EM5 doesn't. It's a deal breaker for some people. I don't mind too much either way, and both do have fully functioning hot shoes. So a big plus point in the EM10 column is because it is a little bit younger, it does have a couple of extra computational features like live composite mode and time-lapse, neither of which were present in the original EM5. And the EM10 also has Wi-Fi. And I know, Emily, why are you bringing up Wi-Fi? It's an old camera. The EM10 has a fun little trick up its sleeve that actually really impressed me, and the Wi-Fi plays into that. We'll talk about that shortly. And another deal breaker for a lot of people. If you are shooting manual focus lenses, the EM10 has focus peaking and the EM5 does not. Now, if you're looking to buy one of these used, just bear in mind that there are many iterations of this camera and they all look nearly identical. We're up to the EM10 Mark IV in the EM10 line, and the EM5 has now merged into the OM5 line from OM System. If you are looking, just make sure which version of this you're buying. If you see one that's like suddenly a couple £100 more, that's probably why. In terms of design, it's very much like Olympus was like, this is the perfect camera, we're just gonna quit while we're ahead. There's been numerous iterations and very little has changed throughout. Disappointingly, some of the more recent iterations have lost the magnesium alloy body and gone for a plastic build quality. So if you are looking for a more robust bargain, ironically, buying the older versions of these cameras is actually better in some ways. And one thing both cameras have that I absolutely love and talk about all the time on this channel is you have a front and back dial. So while it is small in the hand, you have a decent grip, you have a good thumb grip on the back, and you have a dial for your shutter speed and your aperture, or whatever you've set it to, perhaps your ISO. And what this means is it performs like a larger camera, just smaller. If you are used to having dual dials on your main camera, then this will feel identical to that. And the dials are metal, it's very premium, excellent tactile photography experience with both of these cameras. And I much prefer the thumb grip on both of these cameras versus the likes of the Olympus Pen F, which notoriously, for me, 3 copies of the camera, the back grip has come off thrice. The back of these is a lot more robust and much more functional, maybe less stylish looking, but much more comfortable and functional. So circling back to the Wi-Fi, on the EM10 there was a new dial icon that caught my beady little eye. It's a collage setting, which sounds gimmicky and mental, and clearly Olympus thought it was gimmicky because I don't think it's on any other camera that I've ever used. But it's actually genius. If you've ever seen the likes of these 5 split 9x16s on Instagram, I use them all the blooming time on Instagram, you can actually do that in camera in a number of different templates inside the EM10. And because it has Wi-Fi, you can immediately send it to your phone and then post it on socials. And it takes each of the images individually in RAW, so you're not just stuck with the collage at the end. I think that was such a feature that was before its time, and it's sort of come back in fashion now. So yeah, I think it's secretly a social media powerhouse. And you will not often hear anybody wax lyrical about the Wi-Fi functionality of an old camera. Certainly some older Lumix cameras are terrible. But I tested out the Wi-Fi on the EM10 because I wanted to put a collage on my Instagram stories, and I had the app synced and the image on my phone in under 1 minute in real time. So it's not like you've got this old crippled experience. It's actually still working in 2024 absolutely fine. Just the caveat being that it will only take JPEGs and not RAW. But that's the case with a lot of these older Wi-Fi apps, to be honest. So I have to say, the EM10 has impressed me a heck of a lot, and I'm really fond of some of the bells and whistles that this has over the original EM5. I don't quite understand if there's enough differences between these two lines to justify them both existing, and now that I've got to grips with both of them in more detail, I think that's still my conclusion. I think when these were new and camera companies could bring out tiered different options for days, it made a little bit of sense, but now I don't quite understand. Surely there's a massive crossover between the two. Perhaps with the OM5, OM System have finally picked a team and they have stopped the EM10 lineup. If anyone knows anything about that, let me know in the comments. But yeah, it comes down to whether you would like live composite mode, focus peaking in the EM10 versus better stabilization and weather sealing on the EM5. So when you consider that you can find these both for under £200, they are robust, they're stylish, they tick a lot of boxes, and because they're in the Micro Four Thirds ecosystem, very versatile as well. Watch my OM5 review here to see how the EM5 line has progressed to its most recent iteration.